March 22nd, 2024. Cedar Valley Medical Center, Colorado. The maternity ward should have been filled with joy, but instead, it became the scene of an unthinkable tragedy. At 9:47 p.m., 2 gunshots shattered the peaceful silence of room 314. Inside, 29-year-old Ashley Mitchell lay dying, just 3 hours after giving birth to her first child. The killer? Her own husband, David Mitchell, a respected businessman, a pillar of the community, and a man pushed beyond his breaking point. What drove a successful construction company owner to murder his wife in cold blood, with their newborn daughter just feet away? The answer lies in a web of family betrayal so twisted, so shocking, that it would destroy 3 generations of the Mitchell family forever. This is that story. I'm your host, and you're watching Shadows by Barry. What you're about to hear is a real case that shocked the small mountain community of Cedar Valley, Colorado. This episode contains mature content, including descriptions of violence, infidelity, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. March 22nd, 2024. Cedar Valley Medical Center, Colorado. The maternity ward should have been filled with joy, but instead, it became the scene of an unthinkable tragedy. At 9:47 p.m., 2 gunshots shattered the peaceful silence of room 314. Inside, 29-year-old Ashley Mitchell lay dying, just 3 hours after giving birth to her first child. The killer? Her own husband, David Mitchell, a respected businessman, a pillar of the community, and a man pushed beyond his breaking point. What drove a successful construction company owner to murder his wife in cold blood, with their newborn daughter just feet away? The answer lies in a web of family betrayal so twisted, so shocking, that it would destroy 3 generations of the Mitchell family forever. This is that story. I'm your host, and you're watching Shadows by Barry. What you're about to hear is a real case that shocked the small mountain community of Cedar Valley, Colorado. This episode contains mature content, including descriptions of violence, infidelity, and murder. Listener discretion is advised. What David didn't know was that this act of brotherly love would set in motion a chain of events that would destroy his marriage, his family, and ultimately, his life. Ashley Thompson arrived in Cedar Valley in June 2021 like a breath of fresh air. The 27-year-old marketing executive from Phoenix had come to town for a business conference on mountain resort development, the kind of high-end tourism projects that were transforming small Colorado towns. Ashley was beautiful, ambitious, and sophisticated. She had auburn hair, green eyes, and the kind of polished confidence that came from years of success in corporate America. She graduated from Arizona State University with a marketing degree and had worked her way up to regional marketing director for a major hospitality chain. David Mitchell met Ashley on the first night of the conference at a networking event held at the Cedar Valley Lodge. He'd been invited as a local contractor who might bid on upcoming resort projects. It was like watching a movie, said conference attendee Jennifer Walsh. David was this rugged outdoorsy mountain man, and Ashley was this sleek city woman. They were completely different, but the attraction was immediate and obvious. They spent the entire evening talking. What followed was a whirlwind romance that surprised everyone who knew David. The normally cautious, methodical businessman was suddenly flying to Phoenix every other weekend. Ashley was making frequent trips to Colorado. Within 6 months, she quit her job and moved to Cedar Valley to be with him. The move wasn't easy for Ashley. Cedar Valley was a far cry from Phoenix. Smaller, slower, more traditional. Some locals were suspicious of the outsider who'd swept their most eligible bachelor off his feet. Ashley struggled to find work that matched her experience and salary expectations. Ashley was used to being important, being successful, said her former colleague Maria Santos. In Cedar Valley, she was just David Mitchell's girlfriend. I think that was hard for her. But David was smitten. He'd never met anyone like Ashley, someone who challenged him intellectually, who brought excitement and sophistication to his ordered mountain life. He proposed on Christmas Eve 2021, during a skiing trip to Vail. Ashley said yes, But friends noticed she seemed ambivalent about small-town life. She talked about missing the energy of the city, the career opportunities, the cultural diversity. She loved David, but she wasn't sure she loved his world. David and Ashley Mitchell were married on October 15th, 2022, in a ceremony at the family ranch overlooking Cedar Valley. It was the social event of the year. 200 guests, including the mayor, the county judge, and most of the town's business elite. Ashley looked radiant in a designer gown that had cost more than most Cedar Valley residents made in a month. David, in his black tuxedo, couldn't stop smiling. Even Ryan, who served as best man, managed to stay sober and give a heartfelt speech about family, love, and new beginnings. The newlyweds honeymooned in Europe, 2 weeks touring Italy and France. When they returned, they moved into a stunning new home that David had built for them on the outskirts of town. The 4,000-square-foot modern house featured floor-to-ceiling windows, a gourmet kitchen, and panoramic views of the Rocky Mountains. For a while, it seemed like Ashley had found her place in Cedar Valley. She started a small marketing consulting business, working with local tourism companies and restaurants. She joined the country club, volunteered for charity events, and began to build friendships with other young professional women in town. David's business continued to thrive. Mitchell Construction had contracts for 3 major resort developments, and David was being courted by investors who wanted to expand the company's reach across Colorado and Wyoming. Then, on Christmas morning 2023, Ashley gave David the news they'd both been hoping for. She was pregnant. David was over the moon, said his secretary, Linda Hayes. He came into the office the day after Christmas practically floating. He showed everyone the ultrasound picture, talked about converting the spare bedroom into a nursery, buying a bigger truck for car seats and strollers. I'd never seen him so happy. Ashley seemed equally thrilled. She threw herself into pregnancy with the same intensity she'd once applied to marketing campaigns. She read every book, attended every class, and began planning what she called the perfect nursery for our perfect baby. But beneath the surface of this perfect mountain life, cracks were already beginning to form. Cracks that would soon become fissures, and then a chasm that would swallow everything David held dear. Because in January 2024, just weeks after Ashley announced her pregnancy, David made a decision that would change everything. He decided to give his brother Ryan one more chance, a decision that would prove to be the biggest mistake of his life. Ryan joins a family business, and the Mitchell brothers' world begins to crumble. January 15th, 2024. David Mitchell walked into his office at Mitchell Construction and announced to his staff that they'd be welcoming a new member to the team, his brother Ryan. Everyone was surprised, recalled Linda Hayes, David's secretary. Ryan had worked for the company before, doing manual labor during summers in high school. But this was different. David was bringing him into the office, giving him real responsibility. David's plan was simple. Ryan would start as an assistant in the business office, helping with paperwork, scheduling, and basic administrative tasks. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady, it paid well, and it would give Ryan the structure and purpose David believed his brother needed. What David didn't anticipate was how well Ryan would work with Ashley. As David's wife, Ashley had been informally involved in the business since their marriage. She'd help with marketing materials, design the company website, and often stop by the office. When Ryan started working there, Ashley began spending more time at Mitchell Construction, ostensibly to help train him and get him settled. At first, David was pleased. His wife and brother were getting along, Ryan was showing up on time and staying sober, and the business was running smoothly. It seemed like his gamble on giving Ryan another chance was paying off. But by February, David began to notice changes in Ashley's behavior that troubled him. She became secretive about her phone, taking calls in the other room and quickly ending conversations when David entered. She claimed these were business calls, potential clients for her consulting work, but David noticed she was getting a lot of calls late at night and early in the morning. Ashley also began making frequent trips to Denver, claiming she needed to see specialists about her high-risk pregnancy. When David offered to come with her, She insisted she could handle it alone. She said the appointments were routine and boring, and she didn't want him to miss work. "I was concerned about Ashley," said Dr. Jennifer Martinez, Ashley's actual obstetrician in Cedar Valley. "She was supposed to be seeing me every 2 weeks, but she kept canceling appointments. When I asked her about it, she said she was getting additional care in Denver, but I never received any records from Denver doctors." Then there were the mood swings. Ashley had always been strong-willed and occasionally temperamental, but her behavior during pregnancy went beyond normal hormonal changes. She would be loving and affectionate one moment, then cold and distant the next. David attributed these changes to pregnancy stress. Ashley was 29 and had always been career-focused. The prospect of motherhood in a small town might naturally cause anxiety. He tried to be patient and supportive, but privately, he was growing worried about his wife's mental state. What David didn't know was that Ashley's strange behavior had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones and everything to do with his brother Ryan. To understand how Ashley and Ryan's relationship developed, we need to look at what was happening at Mitchell Construction in early 2024. The company was in the middle of its biggest expansion ever. 3 major resort projects were in various stages of development, and David was juggling construction crews, architects, suppliers, and investors. He was working 12-hour days and often traveling to meetings in Denver and Aspen. This left Ryan and Ashley working closely together in the office, often alone for hours at a time. Ryan was surprisingly good with the administrative side of things, said office manager Carol Peters. He had a natural charm that clients liked, and he was actually very organized when he put his mind to it. Ashley seemed to bring out the best in him. Ashley, for her part, was impressed by Ryan's intelligence and creativity. Unlike David, who was practical and straightforward, Ryan was artistic and philosophical. He played guitar, wrote poetry, and had traveled extensively during his periods of unemployment. For Ashley, who sometimes felt stifled by small-town life, Ryan represented excitement and possibility. Their working relationship quickly became personal. They began taking long lunch breaks together, ostensibly to discuss business, but really just to talk. Ryan would stay late at the office, and Ashley would join him, bringing dinner and wine. "I thought it was sweet at first," Carol Peters later told investigators. Ashley was helping Ryan feel welcome, and Ryan was finally taking something seriously. But there was an energy between them that made me uncomfortable. They had inside jokes. They touched each other casually. They had this intimacy that seemed inappropriate. By late February, their relationship had crossed the line from friendship to something more dangerous. The turning point came during a business trip to Denver in early March. Ashley had told David she was going for another doctor's appointment, but in reality, she was meeting with potential investors for one of David's resort projects. Ryan went with her, supposedly to learn more about the business side of the company. They stayed overnight at the Brown Palace Hotel in downtown Denver. 2 rooms were booked, but hotel security footage later showed Ryan entering Ashley's room at 11:30 p.m. and not leaving until 6 a.m. the next morning. When they returned to Cedar Valley, their relationship had fundamentally changed. They were no longer just friends or even close friends. They were lovers, engaged in an affair that would destroy everyone it touched. March 10th, 2024. David Mitchell arrived at his construction site on Copper Mountain to find that someone had broken into his equipment shed overnight. Tools worth thousands of dollars had been stolen, including a nail gun, several power saws, and a generator. It was the 3rd theft in 2 months, and David was fed up. He decided to install security cameras not just at the construction site, but also at his office and, as an afterthought, around his home. "I was mostly worried about the business," David later told investigators. "These thefts were costing me money and delaying projects. I never thought about using the cameras to spy on my wife." The home security system included cameras at the front door, back door, and driveway. David installed them himself over a weekend in mid-March, while Ashley was supposedly visiting a friend in Denver. For the first week, David barely looked at the footage. He was too busy with work to spend time reviewing hours of video showing nothing but an empty driveway and the occasional delivery truck. But on March 18th, something made him check the recordings. David had come home early from a job site, expecting to find Ashley resting at home. Her car was in the driveway, but the house was empty. When Ashley returned an hour later, she claimed she'd been taking a walk around the neighborhood for exercise. Something about her explanation bothered David. Ashley had never been much of a walker, especially during pregnancy, and she seemed flustered, her hair disheveled, her cheeks flushed. That night, after Ashley went to bed, David reviewed the security footage from that afternoon. What he saw changed everything. At 2:30 p.m., while David was at work, a dark blue pickup truck had pulled into his driveway. The driver was clearly visible on camera. It was Ryan. Ryan had used his key. David had given all family members keys to the house to enter through the front door. The interior cameras David had installed showed Ryan walking confidently through the house, as if he knew exactly where he was going. Ashley appeared moments later, and what happened next left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. They embraced passionately in the living room, kissing with an intensity that spoke of deep intimacy, not casual affection. David fast-forwarded through footage, his heart pounding, his hands shaking. For the next 2 hours, Ryan and Ashley were clearly engaged in an affair in David's own home, in the bed he shared with his pregnant wife. Ryan left at 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes before David came home early. If David had arrived just a few minutes earlier, he would have caught them in the act. But David didn't confront them immediately. Instead, he went back through weeks of security footage, discovering a pattern that made him sick to his stomach. Ryan had been coming to the house 2 or 3 times a week, always when David was at work, always staying for several hours. The affair had been going on for weeks, possibly months. David sat in his home office until dawn, staring at the computer screen, trying to process what he'd discovered. His wife, his pregnant wife, was having an affair with his own brother. The 2 people he loved most in the world had betrayed him in the most devastating way possible. But the worst revelation was yet to come. Coming up, David discovers the affair is just the beginning of betrayal, and Ashley drops a bombshell that will change everything. Transition music, March 19th, 2024. David Mitchell barely slept after discovering the security footage of his wife's affair with his brother. As the sun rose over the Rocky Mountains, David sat in his kitchen, drinking coffee and trying to figure out what to do next. His first instinct was to confront them immediately, to drive to Ryan's apartment and demand an explanation, to wake Ashley up and force her to admit what she'd been doing. But David was a methodical man, and something told him he needed to understand the full scope of betrayal before he acted. So instead of confronting them, David decided to investigate further. He started with the family finances. As a successful businessman, David kept meticulous records of all their accounts: checking, savings, credit cards, investments. He'd always trusted Ashley completely and had given her access to everything. Now, as he carefully reviewed months of bank statements and credit card bills, David began to see a disturbing pattern. In January, shortly after Ryan started working at the company, Ashley had transferred $15,000 from their savings account to a checking account David didn't recognize. When he traced the account number, he discovered it belonged to Ryan. In February, another $20,000 had been transferred, this time from David's business account. The memo line read employee advance, but David had never authorized any advance for Ryan. Most shocking of all, in early March, Ashley had transferred $50,000, nearly their entire emergency fund, to Ryan's account. $50,000 that David had been saving for years, money he planned to use for his daughter's college education. The credit card statements revealed even more betrayals. Ashley had been using her cards to pay for hotel rooms in Denver, expensive dinners for her too, and purchases at men's clothing stores. She bought Ryan a $2,000 watch, designer shirts, and a leather jacket that cost more than most people in Cedar Valley made in a month. David discovered that Ryan's gambling debts, debts that had plagued him for years, had suddenly been paid off in February. The payments had come from Ashley's personal account. In total, Ashley had given Ryan over $90,000 of David's money in just 2 months. Money that David had earned through years of hard work. Money that was supposed to secure their family's future. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach, David later told investigators. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the lies. They were stealing from me, using my own money to fund their betrayal. But David still hadn't discovered the most devastating betrayal of all. As David dug deeper into Ashley's deception, he began to focus on something that had been bothering him for weeks. The timeline of Ashley's pregnancy. Ashley had announced her pregnancy on Christmas Day, claiming she was 8 weeks along. That would put the conception date around late October or early November 2023. David began to reconstruct their intimate life during that period, and what he discovered filled him with dread. In late October, David had been traveling extensively for business, negotiating the contract for his major resort projects. He'd been in Aspen for 3 days, then Denver for 2 days, then back to Aspen for a final round of meetings. When he came home, Ashley had seemed distant and distracted. She claimed she was feeling under the weather, possibly coming down with the flu. They'd barely been intimate during that entire period. But there was something else David remembered. Ryan had been acting strangely around that time, too. He'd been talking about wanting to get his life together, about being tired of disappointing the family. He'd seemed excited about something, hopeful in a way David hadn't seen in years. David thought back to Thanksgiving dinner at his parents' house. Ashley had been noticeably absent, claiming she had food poisoning. Ryan had also missed dinner, saying he had to work a double shift at his job at the ski resort. Now, David wondered, had they been together that day while he was with his parents, wondering where they both were? The Christmas announcement took on a new, sinister meaning. David remembered how excited Ryan had been when Ashley shared the news. Most people would be happy for their brother, but Ryan's reaction had been more intense than that. He'd hugged Ashley for a long time, had tears in his eyes, had talked about being the best uncle in the world. At the time, David had been touched by his brother's emotional response. Now he wondered if Ryan's tears had been for a very different reason. David decided he needed medical evidence to confirm his suspicions. He made an appointment with Ashley's obstetrician, Dr. Jennifer Martinez, claiming he wanted to surprise his wife by being more involved in her prenatal care. What Dr. Martinez told him confirmed his worst fears. Ashley's due date, based on her ultrasounds, was March 22nd, Dr. Martinez explained. That means conception occurred around June 25th of last year. Wait, that doesn't sound right. Let me check her chart again. Dr. Martinez frowned as she reviewed Ashley's medical records. I'm sorry, I misspoke. Based on the measurements from her first ultrasound, conception would have been around October 28th. But Mr. Mitchell, I have to tell you, Ashley has been very inconsistent with her appointments. She's canceled several times, and she mentioned getting additional care in Denver. October 28th. David knew exactly where he'd been that day, in a hotel in Denver, 90 miles away from his wife. But he also knew where Ryan had been, working a shift that ended at 3 p.m., giving him the entire evening free. David left Dr. Martinez's office feeling nauseous. The timeline was becoming clearer, and it pointed to a conclusion he couldn't bear to accept. March 20th, 2024. David Mitchell drove to the Mitchell Construction office with one purpose: to confront his brother and demand the truth. It was 5:30 p.m., and most of the employees had gone home for the day. David found Ryan in the main office, working on what appeared to be budget spreadsheets. Ashley wasn't there. She left early, claiming she had a doctor's appointment. "Hey, brother," Ryan said, looking up with a smile. "Working late again? You know, Ashley's right. You need to slow down a little. Think about the stress you're putting on yourself and the baby." The casual mention of the baby hit David like a slap. He closed the office door behind him and turned to face his brother. "Ryan, I need to ask you something, and I want you to tell me the truth." Something in David's tone must have alerted Ryan that this wasn't a casual conversation. His smile faded, and he leaned back in his chair. "Are you having an affair with my wife?" The question hung in the air between them. Ryan's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, and then something that looked like relief. "David, Don't lie to me," David interrupted. "I have security footage. I have financial records. I know about the money. I know about the hotel rooms. I know about the trips to Denver. Just tell me the truth." Ryan was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with tears. "I never meant for this to happen," he said quietly. Those 6 words confirmed David's worst fears. His own brother had betrayed him, had been sleeping with his wife, had been stealing his money. "How long?" David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Since January. Maybe late December." "David, I know how this looks, but you have to understand." "I don't have to understand anything," David snapped. "You're my brother. She's my wife. How could you do this to me?" Ryan stood up, as if he was going to approach David. But David stepped back. "Don't," David warned. "Don't come near me." "David, please, let me explain. It wasn't supposed to happen. We were working together, spending time together, and Ashley was so unhappy." "Ashley was unhappy? So you thought you'd help her feel better by sleeping with her?" "It's more complicated than that. Ashley feels trapped here. Trapped in this small town. Trapped in a life she didn't really choose. She needed someone who understood her. Someone who could see her for who she really is." David stared at his brother in disbelief. "And you think that's you? You think you're what she needs?" "I think we understand each other in a way that you and she never did." The words hit David like a physical blow. Not only had Ryan betrayed him, but he was now claiming that his relationship with Ashley was somehow deeper, more meaningful than David's marriage. "The baby," David said, the words sticking in his throat. "Is it mine?" Ryan's silence was answer enough. "Ryan, answer me. Is the baby mine?" Ryan looked up, and David saw something in his brother's eyes that he'd never seen before. Defiance. "No," Ryan said quietly. "I don't think so. The timing. David, I'm sorry, but I think she's mine." David felt the world tilt beneath his feet. Everything he believed about his life, his marriage, his future, it was all a lie. The baby he'd been eagerly anticipating, the daughter he'd already begun to love, wasn't his child. She was his brother's. "Get out," David said, his voice deadly calm. "David, please, let's talk about this." "Get out," David roared. "Get out of my office. Get out of my company. Get out of my life. If I ever see you again, I'll kill you." Ryan gathered his things quickly and headed for the door. As he reached it, he turned back. "David, for what it's worth, I really am sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did it anyway," David replied. "You destroyed everything anyway." After Ryan left, David sat alone in his office for hours, staring out at the mountains he'd grown up loving, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. His wife, his brother, his unborn child. Everything he'd built his life around was a lie. And in just 2 days, that life would come to a violent, irreversible end. Coming up, Ashley goes into labor, and David must decide whether to save his marriage or destroy it forever. David Mitchell stood in room 314 of Cedar Valley Medical Center, looking at his wife and the baby she held in her arms. The baby that wasn't his. The baby that represented the ultimate betrayal of everything he believed about his life. "Ashley," he said quietly, "I know everything." Ashley's face went white. She pulled Emma closer to her chest, as if protecting the baby from what was coming. "David, I can explain." "No," David interrupted. "No more lies. No more explanations. I know about the affair. I know about the money. I know that Emma isn't my daughter." Ashley started crying, but David felt no sympathy for her tears. "I need to get something from my car," David said. "Don't call anyone. Don't text anyone. Don't try to leave. When I come back, we're going to finish this conversation." David left the room and walked to the hospital elevator, his mind strangely calm. He'd been planning this moment for days, ever since he confirmed the truth about Ashley and Ryan. In the parking garage, David opened the glove compartment of his truck and removed a small lockbox. Inside was his Glock 19, the pistol he'd bought for protection when he started carrying large amounts of cash for construction projects. David had a concealed carry permit and was an experienced shooter. He'd grown up hunting with his father and had continued target shooting as an adult. The gun felt familiar and comfortable in his hands. As he rode the elevator back to the 4th floor, David thought about the choices that had led him to this moment. He could confront Ashley and demand a divorce. He could expose the affair to their friends and family. He could fight for custody of Emma, even though she wasn't biologically his. Or he could end it all right here, right now. He could stop the lies, stop the betrayal, stop the pain that was eating him alive. The elevator doors opened, and David walked down the corridor toward room 314, the weight of the gun heavy in his jacket pocket. David entered room 314 and quietly closed the door behind him. Ashley was still in bed, holding Emma, her face streaked with tears. "David, please," she said as soon as she saw him. "Let me explain what happened." "Go ahead," David said, sitting down in the chair beside her bed. "Explain to me how you ended up sleeping with my brother for months. Explain to me how you stole nearly $100,000 from our accounts. Explain to me how you let me believe I was going to be a father when you knew the whole time that Emma wasn't mine." Ashley took a shaky breath. "It wasn't supposed to happen, David. When Ryan started working at the company, we were just friends. You were always working, always traveling, and I was lonely and scared about the pregnancy. So you decided to sleep with my brother. It wasn't like that. Ryan understood me in a way that you never did. He listened to me. He saw me as more than just your wife or the mother of your child. With him, I felt like myself again." David pulled the gun from his jacket and placed it on the bedside table. Ashley's eyes went wide with terror. "David, what are you doing?" "I'm ending this," David said calmly. "I'm ending the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation. I can't live knowing that everything I believed about my life was a fraud. Please think about Emma. She's innocent in all this. She doesn't deserve to grow up without a mother." "She's not my daughter," David said. "She's Ryan's daughter. Let him worry about her future." Ashley was sobbing now, clutching Emma tightly. "David, I know I hurt you, but we can fix this. We can work through this. I love you. I've always loved you. If you loved me, you wouldn't have slept with my brother. If you loved me, you wouldn't have stolen from me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have let me believe this baby was mine." "The baby? David, I wasn't sure. I thought she might be yours. I hoped she was yours." "Look at her," David said, gesturing toward Emma. "Look at her hair, her features. She looks exactly like Ryan. You knew from the moment she was born that she wasn't mine." Ashley couldn't deny it anymore. The resemblance was too obvious, too undeniable. "What do you want me to say?" she whispered. "Yes, I had an affair. Yes, I took money from our accounts. Yes, Emma is probably Ryan's daughter. I made terrible mistakes, but I can't undo them now." "No," David agreed, picking up the gun. "You can't undo them, but I can end them." "David, no." Ashley screamed. "Please, think about what you're doing." But David was beyond thinking, beyond reasoning. The pain and rage that had been building for days finally erupted. And in that moment, there was only one way he could see to make it stop. "I loved you," he said, raising the gun. "I loved you more than anything in this world, and you destroyed me." "I'm sorry," Ashley sobbed. "I'm so sorry, David. Please don't do this." David looked at her one last time. The woman he'd planned to spend his life with. The woman who betrayed him with his own brother. The woman who had given birth to another man's child while letting him believe it was his. "I'm sorry, too," he said. and then he pulled the trigger. The first shot hit Ashley in the chest, just below her left shoulder. She gasped, her eyes wide with shock and pain, but she didn't let go of Emma. The baby started crying, a piercing wail that seemed to echo off the hospital walls. David fired again, this shot hitting Ashley in the heart. She fell back against the pillows, her arms going limp, Emma rolling slightly but remaining on her mother's chest. For a moment, the room was silent except for Emma's cries. Ashley's eyes were open, staring at the ceiling, but David could see that she was gone. He looked down at Emma, still crying on her dead mother's body, her pink hospital blanket now stained with blood. The baby was unharmed physically, but she would grow up marked by this moment, by the violence that had brought her into the world and taken her mother away. David set the gun on the bedside table and sat back down in the chair. He felt empty, hollow, as if the rage that had driven him to this moment had taken everything else with it when it left. He could hear footsteps in the corridor, voices calling out, the sound of people running. Someone had heard the shots, and soon the room would be filled with police and paramedics and chaos. But for now, in these last moments of quiet, David looked at Ashley's body and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret, no relief. Just emptiness. He picked up Emma, gently lifting her from her mother's chest and holding her against his shoulder. Her cries gradually subsided, and she settled into the familiar rhythm of being held. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the baby. "I'm sorry you'll grow up knowing what I did. I'm sorry you'll never know how much I wanted to be your father." The door burst open, and hospital security officers rushed in, followed by nurses and doctors. David made no move to resist as they took Emma from his arms and guided him away from Ashley's body. As they led him from the room, David looked back one last time at the woman he'd loved and killed, at the life he'd destroyed in his quest to end his pain. David Mitchell was arrested in the hospital chapel, where he'd gone after shooting his wife. He was found sitting in the front pew, the murder weapon on the altar, his clothes stained with Ashley's blood. He confessed immediately, telling investigators the entire story, the affair, the financial betrayal, the pregnancy deception. He showed no remorse for killing Ashley, but he wept when they told him that Emma had been placed in protective custody. Ryan Mitchell was arrested the next day as an accessory to embezzlement for accepting the money Ashley had stolen from David's accounts. He was released on bail pending trial, but the damage to his life was irreversible. His brother had murdered the woman he loved, and his daughter would grow up knowing that her father's affair had led to her mother's death. The trial lasted 3 weeks. David's defense attorney argued for a reduced sentence based on extreme emotional disturbance, but the jury wasn't swayed. The premeditated nature of the crime, David had brought a gun to the hospital specifically to kill Ashley, made it first-degree murder. David Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He showed no emotion when the verdict was read, and he declined to make a statement to the court. Baby Emma was eventually adopted by Ashley's sister, who lived in Phoenix. She'll grow up knowing the truth about her parents, about the affair that created her and the jealousy that killed her mother. Ryan Mitchell pleaded guilty to the embezzlement charges and served 18 months in prison. He was released in December 2025 and now works at a gas station in Denver. He has never tried to contact his daughter. The small mountain town of Cedar Valley was forever changed by the tragedy. The Mitchell Construction Company folded within months of David's arrest, putting dozens of people out of work. The family name, once synonymous with integrity and success, became associated with betrayal and murder. David Mitchell remains in the Colorado State Penitentiary, where he spends his days in solitary confinement, thinking about the choices that led him to that hospital room. In his rare interviews with prison counselors, he maintains that he had no choice, that Ashley and Ryan had left him no option but violence. "I couldn't live knowing they had made a fool of me," he told one counselor. "I couldn't pretend that their betrayal didn't matter. I had to make it stop." But the truth is that nothing stopped. The pain didn't end when Ashley died. The betrayal didn't disappear when Ryan went to prison. The lies didn't become truth when the affair was exposed. All David accomplished was destroying what remained of his family, traumatizing an innocent child, and trading a life of heartbreak for a life of emptiness behind bars. The case of David Mitchell serves as a stark reminder that betrayal, no matter how devastating, is never justification for murder, that the desire for revenge, no matter how understandable, can transform victims into monsters, and that some choices, once made, can never be undone. Thank you for listening to True Crime Chronicles. If you or someone you know is struggling with thoughts of violence or suicide, please reach out for help. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is available 24 hours a day at 988. Remember, there's always another choice. There's always another way. Until next time, stay safe.